Hey guys, it's Daichi. This is the second part of my gamedevTV Game Jam devlog. So I successfully finished my game on time last weekend after working on it quite intensively for 2 weeks. And the response has been overwhelmingly positive. And I'm just genuinely happy that I made something that people enjoy. I'd like to thank all of you who played the game and gave me feedback. I have a long list of things to fix and implement. And if you haven't tried it, I'll put a link in the description. In this video, I'll break down what I worked on during the week leading up to the deadline day by day and show you things like how I designed the colors, the UI, and scene transitions, how I added juice to the game, and how I came up with challenging fun puzzles. I sprinkled in some useful tips here and there on how to achieve some of the things I did in the game, so I hope it helps. Just a quick word to my awesome 27 subscribers. Thank you for your support. That's more than double last week. My algorithm tells me that at this rate, we'll reach 1 million subscribers in no time. I'm trying to make each video better than the last, so if you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it in the comments. Oh, and I have a Discord channel. I have no idea how it works, but I'll put a link in the description. So this is how it all went down.
7 days remaining.
I posted a GIF of the game on the Unity 2D subreddit, and I received lots of great feedback. And one recurring point was the overly aggressive color scheme. So I changed up the color palette to soften the tones to save people's eyes and my own from bleeding neon tears. I made a couple levels and made my wife try one of them. Yeah, no, she's not a gamer.
6 days remaining.
I had this idea of a laser that would harm the player but let bullets and other objects through. I thought this would add an interesting mechanic where the player could use bullets or boxes to block the laser to get where they need. This uses a raycast to project a line in one direction from one point and terminates wherever it detects a collision. If it collides with the player, you die. I also created a particle system and placed its position at the point where the raycast collides, simulate little sparks and make it look like it's scorching the surface. Then I created a few levels using the lasers and called it a day.
5 days remaining.
This was the day I encountered an obnoxious bug. A minuscule amount of velocity was being applied to the player for a split second after the movements completely stopped. This caused issues where the player would flip to face right even when moving left, or vice versa. I tried increasing the friction and the mass, changing from capsule to box collider, turning off the animator, but nothing was working. I switched the player back to my original one, and the problem disappeared for a while, but resurfaced a few days later. Then after hours of debugging, I removed the composite collider in the tile map, and the problem went away. I'm not even sure if that was what was causing the issue, but I was just glad the bug was gone. Another thing I did was to find a color scheme that would be accessible for the colorblind. This one looked good, so I just went with it.
4 days remaining.
This day I focused on spicing up the player. I decided to add a motion blur to the player because I thought it was fitting, considering it's a time manipulation game. This is done by repeatedly instantiating a copy of the player in the current position, and quickly fading it away by changing the alpha through an animation. This gives the illusion of motion blur. I then added a squash and stretch to the player through an animator. In addition to the usual squash and stretch when jumping and landing, the player also squashes when they walk over a button, which gives an impression that it's pressing down, which I liked. Also, when you shoot, you squash as if you're spitting out the bullet. I also tried some particles, but they didn't quite work, so that was scrapped. All of these small changes made the player feel alive and fun to control.
3 days remaining.
This day, I added screen shakes and created a unique magic moment when the time stops. So I added screen shakes to the shooting and a few other places. It's amazing how much better the gameplay feels just by doing this. If you're looking to add this effect to your game, I recommend using Easy Screen Shake. It's free and you just need to download it and throw it into your game. I'll leave a link in the description. Since stopping time is the core mechanism of the game, I decided to make that a more unique experience, because this wasn't cutting it. I decided that the color should invert, and this was more like it. I just want to walk you through the code for stopping time, since that's where all the magic happens for this game. It's a bit technical, but bear with me. So here's how it works. When the player presses the space key, it first checks whether time is frozen or not. If it isn't, i.e. time is moving, then a bunch of things happen. First, it turns the frozen boolean to true, and changes the colors of the scene, which is done by inverting the colors of the tile map layers, and finding everything in the scene except the player and the goal, and turning them white. The switches become the same color as the floor to indicate they are no longer interactable. Bullet pickups also stop bobbing up and down. It then calls the function freeze props, which turns the rigid body of the falling objects to static. It also stores the current velocity in a variable, so when time is unfrozen, it continues falling at the same rate. And it also plays a sound and shakes the camera a little. The unfreeze basically does everything in reverse. Now the bullet is a little different from the falling objects, as it does not have a rigid body attached to it. The reason is, the bullet is basically a moving platform, and the player needs to be a child of the bullet when on top, so they move together. It moves by adding a vector every frame. So stopping the bullet is very simple. It just stops updating its position when the frozen boolean is true. So quite a bit happens under the hood. I also added a bunch of sound effects to all the actions.
Two days remaining.
I didn't get to do much this day as I had a nighttime programming course. I implemented a simple scene manager. I created a small restart button with animations. This is easily done by changing the transition to animation, and for each state you can define a unique animation. Super easy to do. My Reddit post blew up with almost 300 upvotes, which is quite a lot since I'm used to getting 1 or 2 upvotes on my posts. Reddit's actually been instrumental in getting people's feedback.
1 day remaining.
This day, I created death particles and spent the rest of the day tidying things up. The particle system is very robust, but quite overwhelming with all the different options. If you want gravity to affect your particles, all you have to do is change the gravity modifier to something like 1. If you want the particles to collide, you turn on collision here and change the type to world. And here you can choose what layers they collide with. You can play around with these settings to achieve what you're looking for. I added a button with a link to my YouTube so I can trick people into coming to my desolate channel. I remade all the levels with the up-to-date template, and created more levels that slowly introduce the player to new mechanics. I sequenced the levels so that the player is introduced to a single new mechanic in one level, and the 2 or 3 levels after that teach the players various ways the mechanic can be used to solve puzzles. I do that for each unique mechanic, and eventually combine various ones in the later levels. I was originally going to name the game Time Freezing Bullet Writing Square Meets Circle, but decided to name it simply Stop. I like quirky names, but oh well. I started to work on the title page. This is my wife trying out the first few levels.
0 days remaining.
I created an end screen. I added a few more levels. I packaged the whole thing, and it was 10 minutes before the deadline when I submitted it. At the end of it all, I was really happy with what I made. It was far from perfect, but it was an actual game with enough levels to keep the players entertained for some time. Well, I thought the end of the jam will be the end of the game, but with the amount of positive feedback I've been getting, I'm going to develop the game further. The time-stopping mechanic has a lot more potential than I've been able to explore so far. It's also just a really fun game to work on. Well, that was a long one. If you made it to the end, you're awesome. Thank you and see you next time.